I love trailers. They get my heart going. So that's X-Men. Those of you who are not familiar with X-Men, it's about mankind, which is us, and a bunch of mutants who have crazy superpowers, and some of them use them for good, and some of them use them for bad. They are kind of outcasts in the world. Humans do not like them, and they're trying to do everything possible to find out who they are and destroy them. And this movie this is not the first X-Men movie. There's been a lot of them over the years. This movie takes place in the future and takes place in the past, as you can tell by the title. But this movie takes place in 2023. And in 2023, they are all now this X-Men group who help mankind. And even though humans don't like them, they have assembled this group of people led by Professor X, the man in the wheelchair that has a head like mine. And he is like their leader. He's like the father, the mentor, the teacher, and he's just a very wise man. And then there's Wolverine, the guy that was ripped with the hairy chest that I wish I had and my dad and brother have, but I didn't get it for some reason, which I'm still angry about, but that's a different sermon for a different day. And so here's Wolverine. He gets chosen to go back into time, all the way back to 1973. So this movie takes place in two different eras. But here's what he has to accomplish. It's a huge, huge task. And I'm not going to give anything away. I'm just going to basically tell you the plot. There's these machines that were created back in the 70s called the Sentinels. And what they were is, think of Iron Giant. They're these gigantic robots that had the power and the wisdom to know who a mutant was and who a human was, because they looked the same. And when they knew who a mutant was, they would kill them. And then if they didn't know if you were human, you were safe. Well, then fast forward to 2023, these Sentinels have now, like most machines in movies, turned against all of mankind. So now they are now killing all humans. So now it's a race against time. So Wolverine is going to go back in time and try to stop the man who basically okayed to get these things built so that in 2023 they don't exist, which means all is well. So that's basically the movie. It's actually a really good movie. I enjoyed it, even if you don't like superhero movies or mutants. It's a great movie. It's very entertaining. But here's the thing. Here's what was most memorable scene for me, and what aspect of faith can we draw from this film. And today we're going to talk about this quote from this movie. And this quote I'm about to read to you is Professor X talking to his younger self, because his younger self was broken. He had lost his path. He had given up hope. He thought everything was done in 1973. So here he is in 2023. He has these crazy mind powers where he can talk to people, and he talks to himself. And this is what he says to himself: just because someone stumbles and loses their path doesn't mean they can't be saved. So just because someone stumbles and loses their path doesn't mean they can't be saved. Over the last 6 months, some of you may have noticed, some of you may have not, and the ones that have not, I'll cry later. But I've been MIA from Blue Bridge for about 6 weeks. I was here 2 weeks ago, but before that I was gone for about 4 weeks. And I was off running Young Life camps down in Oregon. And what I love about Young Life is we get to go out and reach the farthest out kid. And they may not all look the same, but they all need Jesus. It's an outreach type ministry. And when we run camps, those are the kind of kids that are coming to our camps. And so when I was at camp, I was exposed to a lot of kids who need Jesus. A lot of kids who are battling suicide, broken families, identity issues, drugs and alcohol abuse, eating disorders, rape, just abuse, abandonment, and then also just battling believing in this so-called God. See, a lot of those kids that I got to work with over the last 6 weeks had stumbled and lost their path. And the cool part about camp was we also got to see a lot of those kids at the end with their leaders from where they were from make the choice to follow Jesus, which was so exciting, and that's why we do what we do. And that's the same way I love Young Life. This is the same way I love Blue Bridge. Because here at Blue Bridge, we're all about loving, growing, and serving. And in those three things, we're hoping that in our community, we are able to help those who have stumbled and lost their path to create environments where they can meet Jesus and hopefully make a choice to follow Jesus. So today we're going to look at Jesus and how he handled those who had stumbled and lost their path as well in his time while he was on earth. And today we're going to spend time in the book of Matthew. chapter 9, verse 9. And the verse that I want to share with you guys right away is our verse of the day. And it's this. This is Jesus speaking, and we'll get to this in a minute. But he says, this is the NLT. He says this, "For I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners." And right now, if you guys could turn with me to the book of Matthew, and there's a Bible here with you. It's the ESV, or go on the YouVersion app, which is a fantastic app that we're big supporters of. But Matthew 9, verse 9 through 13 is actually on page 693 in the Bible that we provided for you, the first book in the New Testament. And to give you a quick synopsis of where we are, Jesus has begun his ministry here on earth. He had just got done healing a man whose friends loved him so much that they dug a hole through a roof and lowered him into Jesus because the place was so crowded they couldn't get to him. And so this place was called Capernaum, and they brought their friend to him. And then now Jesus had just left there, and now he was going on a new journey. So I want you guys to do something with me today that I love to do. First, I'll say this. Anytime I have a chance to talk to people, whether it's kids, adults, whoever, I say, let's put ourselves in this story today. Let's really begin to think about the characters, the setting, and let's really begin to imagine what it looked like. Use your imagination. Jesus can be 7 feet tall or 4 feet tall. I don't really care. He can be buff or skinny. But here's the thing. I love this Bible because it's one ongoing story that has closed page to page, cover to cover, but the story's not over. We're living it and we're in it, and today we have an opportunity to go back and read about it and then also go from here today and make impact in the story altogether. But in this story that we're going to read today, there's 4 major characters I want you to focus on. There's Jesus, there's Matthew, there's Matthew's friends, and then there's the Pharisees. The Pharisees, just think of a modern day pastor, a modern day person who knows the word, a theologian, someone who has studied the word most of his life, knows it, loves it, teaches it. Okay? So those are the 4 major characters we're going to focus on today. The second thing is the setting. The setting right now is he's outside of the city. He had just left Capernaum. He's on the outskirts of the town, basically where the water was, where the commercial ships would come in and they would trade, they would sell, they would barter, they would hang out. It was the modern day marketplace. It's where everybody came to gather. It's where people came to eat. It's where people came to just hang out. Imagine the mall, and that's where we were, but we were next to water. So there's a lot going on here. It's a ways from the synagogue. So a lot of people in the synagogue, just for you, as we read it, is just a modern day church for them back then, a place of worship. And you see in this story, now we're away from the synagogue. Jesus has chosen to walk away from the synagogue and go into the marketplace and be with the culture. Okay? And then the second place we'll focus on today is Matthew's house, his crib, okay, which is probably awesome. So let's jump into this story right now. So right away in verse 9, again, we're in Matthew 9:9, he says this. It says this, "As Jesus passed on from there." I want to stop right there because this is a huge part of what we're talking about today. So in Matthew 9:9, he says, as Jesus went there, he's on his way to the next town. But before he does, he's stopping in to check in with a lot of people. The key part is Jesus chose to leave the synagogue, to go away, to go where the people are, to put himself inside the culture. And this is huge because now Jesus valued the synagogue. He valued the church. It's where he learned as a kid. It's where he listened as a kid. It's where he still went with his disciples. It's where he still taught. But he's also spent a lot of his time outside of there and in the culture. And so right away we see something about Jesus that he doesn't want people to come to him. He wants to go to where they are. No matter what they look like, no matter what choices they're making in their lives, no matter what people they hang out with, right away we see something about Jesus that's different from the modern day teacher back then. And so what happens is simply this, is Jesus is walking through the town. He comes upon a man named Matthew. Okay, and Matthew is an interesting guy. He's a tax collector, which some of us may know means that you're a traitor, you're a loner. And what I mean by loner is that you don't have friends. What I mean by loner is it means the town that you're from, people don't really like you because of what you do. And then the person you work for, which is Rome, they don't really care for you, but they want you to do your job because they know what a tax collector does is he takes money from people, their taxes, that live in that town. But see, what they did back then is they collected a lot more money than they should have been. So they were corrupt people, and they were people who didn't have many friends from their hometown, And Rome, all they cared about was do your job, but I know you're not doing it the right way, but oh well. So they were basically a man without a country, a man without an identity, okay? So his friends were other tax collectors because that's the circle they ran in. And then also people who were the lowest of lows, the criminals, the outcasts, the outsiders. And so here's this Matthew guy at a nice little booth, which was probably tiny, and in the heat, in the marketplace, doing his job that people did not respect or did not really like the dude. And Jesus sees this man, and he approaches him. And this is what he says, is he basically said, let's jump right back, and he says, will you follow me? Follow me, Matthew. And here's the catch is, at this point, Jesus had already called some of his disciples. Jesus had already had some people following him by the names of Andrew, James, Peter, and John, and others that aren't mentioned. And in this moment, I believe that Matthew was just waiting for someone to invite him to something. Because you got to think about it. Think of our world that we live in today. Think of a high schooler who really, a lot of high schoolers look a lot different. Some look like they have it all together, but inside they're broken. They put a mask on. Some, you can see their brokenness on the outside. And they're just waiting for someone to listen to them. Or they're waiting for someone to care about them. Or they're waiting for someone just to acknowledge them. And when somebody does, they jump at the opportunity. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not the right opportunity. Now, if you look at adults in our life, we all know friends that have a nice house, a great job, a nice family, but they're broken. But you can't see it on the outside, it's on the inside. And they're just waiting for someone to invite them to something. Or you look at modern day celebrities. We all read the tabloids, we're in line. I love it. It's almost entertaining to me. It's fun. And you see constantly celebrities living broken lives. And apparently they have it all. That's what we're taught. They have money, they have good looks, they have fame, they can get whatever they want, they can do whatever they want, but we constantly see the same thing over and over and over again, and is that their lives are broken because they're missing that one thing that you can't get with money, that you can't get with fame, and that's simply Jesus. And so here's Matthew in this tax booth. And here's this man who's approaching him. Hey, follow me. And I don't think Matthew at that time knew exactly what Jesus was about or exactly who he was or completely believed in Jesus at that moment. But I think at that time he was simply saying, hey, you know what? I'm tired of this life that I'm living. I have money. I have friends. I have a job that people that are afraid of me. I have not respect, but I have freedom. And he was just waiting for an opportunity. And that opportunity was Jesus, and so he jumped at it. And here's the cool thing. In verse 10, not in Matthew, but if you go to Luke 5:29, which is the same story, but told by a different author, he says that after Matthew chose to follow him, Matthew threw Jesus and his friends a party. And this is why I love this, because here's Matthew, a broken man who's been searching for something for a very long time. And he meets Jesus, and the first thing he does is he celebrates. And I want to ask you guys a quick question just to think about is, when was the last time you celebrated with Jesus? Like truly just sat down and be like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Because here's Matthew, a new believer, a person who had turned from his old life of sin and chose to turn back to Jesus. And he throws him a party. And here's the coolest part about that party. Is yes, he invited Jesus and Jesus' disciples, who became his family. But here's the catch. Matthew invited all of his friends, which were tax collectors and quote-unquote sinners, the lowest of the lows, to this house where Jesus was and all of his disciples were. And a disciple is just someone who's learning from someone, being mentored, being taught. And so I love that because Matthew meets Jesus, then he brings Jesus to his friends, the outsiders, the sinners. And then if you go into Matthew 9:11, here's where it gets good. So again, here's Jesus away from the modern day church, and he sees a man, he meets this guy, he's like, follow me, he does that, a man that really has no no business being with Jesus, but Jesus loves everybody and sees value in everybody, and he goes with them. Well, then there's we talked about the Pharisees. Now this is where the Pharisees enter the story, okay? And the Pharisees see Jesus at this tax collector's house with a bunch of other tax collectors and sinners with his disciples. So as Pharisees do something that's a little bit odd, is they go behind Jesus' back and they approach his disciples because they don't want to go to Jesus because they don't respect him. And they go behind his back and they simply say, hey, why are you guys here with these people? Your so-called teacher, your so-called prophet, your so-called leader is bringing you around this group? Are you kidding me? And Jesus being Jesus, the ultimate man of one-liners, the ultimate man that can just shut people up because he's that good, is he hears what's going on because he knows everything that's going on because he's God and bod, is what I like to say in Young Life. And he hears this and he steps in. He's like, no, I got this. Don't worry. Let me take care of this. Really quick, let me say this. Jesus loved the Pharisees. He loved them just like he loved every other person at that time, and he loves everyone at this time. The reason why I love the way he talked to the Pharisees is he wasn't talking down to them necessarily. He was hoping that they would catch it. So if you look in all the stories when he calls out Pharisees, yes, he's calling them out, but more importantly, he's trying to get them to learn what he's trying to get everyone else to learn. So it's less about him putting them in their place, and it's more about him trying to share his love, but in a creative way. And I want to read to you basically what he says in verse 11, because this is everything what I read you, the verse of the day, is he says this. He says, and when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, why does your teacher eat with the tax collectors and sinners? Verse 12 and 13 is when Jesus responds, and he says this, but when he heard it, he said, this is Jesus speaking, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick, go and learn what this means. So basically he's saying, hey, listen, I'm not here for the well, I'm here for the sick. And there's more meaning behind that than we realize. See, in this moment, Jesus begins to stress that it's no longer about religious rituals. It's no longer about sacrificing animals and going into the temple and going behind and all these things. It's about relationship with him. That's why he came. That's why he's here that's why he's here in the story right now. And he's trying to teach these Pharisees, listen, you're missing it. I'm here. The person that we've been waiting for, I'm here. And he's beginning to show the disciples what it looks like to love people, being in the culture, being in the marketplace. And so Jesus begins to stress mercy as well. If you look at, there's a version called The Voice Bible, and he uses the word mercy. And when he uses the word mercy, he's talking about how we want to begin to be generous, forgiving, compassionate, healing, how mercy really begins to link us to God. And the coolest part, too, another version says, I have come. And what Jesus is insinuating by that is he's basically letting them know, hey, listen, I'm here right now, but I've been here all along. I was here before creation. I was with God and the Holy Spirit. I'm always going to be here no matter what. And that was a huge statement. So a couple of questions I have for you guys today is this. Do you believe that God calls everyone to follow him? And what does a modern day outcast look like? Who do you overlook in your lives? Who do we overlook in our lives? I'm just as guilty. You see, just as Jesus met Matthew where he was at, he wants to meet everyone, including us, where we are at. So do we love the outcasts, the outsiders, the same way? The undocumented worker that works out in the fields here in the Tri-Cities? The homeless man on the corner? The prostitute? The meth addict? The homosexual? Those in prison for horrible crimes that we can't believe they would do that? Do we look at them the same ways we look at anybody else? Do we look at them as Jesus looked at them? And here's a question I have for you is I want you to begin to think deeper. When we think of outsider, outcasts, the overlooked, it's easy to think of what I just mentioned. But what about this group of people? And think of those, maybe even someone who's in this room right now who we dearly love and care for. People who've suffered divorce, heroes that are single moms, senior citizens, those secretly struggling with porn or drinking too much alcohol, those who swear, watch horrible entertainment, like cats or soccer. Just want to see if you're listening. All forms of sexual immorality, people who spend too much money or save too much money, eat too much or care far too much what they look like. See, outcasts and outsiders, we stereotype so many different people, and sometimes we miss it. We must get to know them as personally as Jesus did. Only close and trusted friends were able to share a table of fellowship over meals. See, going back to that story where Jesus went to Matthew's house to have a party and celebrate what was happening, there's a reason why the tax collectors and sinners stayed. That's because they trusted Matthew. So Matthew had earned the right with them to have credibility to bring a guy like Jesus and his disciples who were nothing like them and bring them into one place and gather and hang out. And I truly believe that Jesus was there for multiple reasons. One, to show them that he loves them. And two, he was there to listen. He was there to hear what an outsider thought, how they acted, what they talked about, what their days looked like, how did they respond to a bad day. You see, Jesus was not just good at teaching, he was great at listening. So I ask you this question: when was the last time we reached out to someone we hated or hated us? And I'm not asking us to join in with others' sin. I'm not asking us to put ourselves in poor positions if we struggle with something, or if we're in high school. Don't think you can go home now and be like, hey, Mom, Troy said I need to hang around sinners, so I'm going to go to this party because that's what I need to do. That's not going to work. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, so I'm not asking us to put ourselves in poor positions. If we struggle with something, obviously we're not going to put ourselves around that until we're ready. But it's important that we go places with them and encounter the world's wickedness just as Jesus did. You see, I was, and still struggle at times, guilty of a lot of the things that I listed off. I was just as broken. I have stumbled many times. I have lost my path many times. But I have been saved by Jesus. And now I want my family, my friends, every kid in the Paso School District where we do Young Life, every person in the community that we call the Tri-Cities, to hear about Jesus and to have a chance to be saved by him also. You see, we're all here because of someone. Someone invited us here. Someone invited us to somewhere in our lives. We got invited to something that led to us to reaching out to Jesus and beginning to live life with him. So we want to begin to do that for others starting today. And I know we already have, but it's just a great reminder to always remember. You see, outsiders, if you watch them and listen to them, if you give them a chance, if you go to coffee with them and you've been a friend with this guy for 10 years, and you just say, hey, Bob, you know I love you, right? You know we go way back. We've been through a lot together, some good times, some bad times. Tell me, you know what I stand for. You know I love Jesus. But tell me this, why don't you go to church? What about church scares you? Or why do you, not even scares you, why don't you go to church? And just listen to them. Give them a chance to share. And then it's our job to take that information and do something with it. So what might we do? What might we do to be more concerned with the people we are trying to reach instead of the ones that are already here? You see, Blue Bridge was not built by Justin, the lead team, the trustees, to reach other people who are already going to church. It's not built for, hey, you go to Faith, you should come to Blue Bridge. We have better music. Hey, you go to Bethel? Oh, man, they're terrible at communicating. You should come over here. Justin's awesome. And they're not. That's not what I'm saying. They're fantastic. But we're not here. Blue Bridge is not here just to get a bunch of other churchgoers who are going to come here. Blue Bridge was created to love, grow, and serve our community and to begin to love people in a way where they see something in us to where they can ask questions or we can listen to them and they can meet Jesus and they can make the choice for themselves to follow him. That's why Blue Bridge is here. And so here are a few things that we can begin to do ourselves. Is we can pray 5 minutes a day for your 5 people. 5 for 5. You've heard it for a long time. And my hope for you today is that your 5 are people who truly would look, not necessarily, they're not outsiders, we don't look down upon them, but they're people who are broken and they need Jesus. They're not people who are already connected to a church, love God, and are doing well. My hope, and it's not that those people don't need prayer. We need prayer as well. We all do. But my prayer is that we will be very, very intentional with our 5 for 5. The second one is this, bringing 10 people in 12 months. 5 more people than your 5. That is your 10. And that we could be creative with getting people here who have never heard about Jesus or have walked away from Jesus at one point in their lives. And we try to do creative things. We showed a movie, I believe, last week, and we're showing another movie next week, which Amanda will talk about later. But those are just creative ways where you can invite friends to come. It's an easy ask, and hopefully we will begin to all bring our 10 people throughout the year. Serving somewhere in the community. We asked at Blue Bridge, a big part of who we are is serve. And so we asked that we would serve somewhere in the community 2 to 4 hours a week, or 2 to 4 hours a month, or is it a week? A month, sorry. And there's lots of places you can get plugged in at. There's Young Life in Pasco, Kennewick, Richland. There's the Teen Pregnancy Center. There's Ignite Youth Mentor. There's the Hungry and the Homeless Shelter called the Union Gospel Mission, which is fantastic. There's the Special Needs at the Special Olympics. There's the Addicts at the Teen Challenge. There's all kinds of different nonprofits and organizations in the Tri-Cities where you can get plugged in at. And we really encourage you guys to do that. And the last one is baptism. Now you may be wondering, how is baptism, which is me getting baptized, helping the quote-unquote outsiders, which we're talking about today. And here's why. The same way, the first thing Matthew did after he chose to follow Jesus was he created an environment where he could expose all of his friends to Jesus. And he could show them what Jesus did for him. And that's what baptism is. See, baptism is less about you. It's more about showing your church, your family, your friends, what God has done inside of you. It's an outward expression of an inward work. So if you get baptized, it's a great opportunity to invite everybody. Hey, I'm making a really big choice in my life to follow Jesus, and we're going to celebrate it. Would you come hang out with me for that day and celebrate with me? And then that day, they get to hear the gospel. They get to see you get baptized. That's why we value baptism. And that's why we value it as it being more about not just you, but about your family, your friends, and so on. I'm going to share one more quote with you from the movie X-Men, and it's this. In the movie, Wolverine, as he goes back into time, back to 1973, he comes across a guy who he had known in the future and had worked with, whatever you want to call it. And this guy, after he buys into Wolverine's story of coming from the future, which is weird, asks him this question. I probably shouldn't be asking you this sort of thing, but in the future, do I make it? And Wolverine sadly has to answer, no, but we can change that, right? And so today, I want to challenge us. There are people in our lives who don't know Jesus or have walked away from him. And we want to see them experience the same life-changing transformation we have, and we want to see them have peace and joy about their future, even though life never gets easier. We want to see their lives secure for eternity. Because when we don't have a time machine to go back. Like this in this movie. It's either now or never. So my challenge is, let's go tell everyone. And I'm going to share a quick story with you guys, 2 stories. One, I talked about earlier how, we need to go out and be with people in the wickedness and be in the culture and embrace it instead of always point our fingers at it. And, I work for Young Life, and so in Young Life, I communicate with a lot of our personal donors who support our area. And I remember we sent out a newsletter one time, and it had a picture of our kids at a Halloween party. And they were all dressed up in Halloween outfits, and we put this on our newsletter. And I got a phone call, and they wanted to meet with me, so I went and met with them. And this donor, who I respect and I love, was not happy with me because I threw a Halloween party for our kids. And they believe that that's the devil's holiday, and there's no room for that when anything with Jesus. And so I get very defensive. And so I had to calmly just take a deep breath and say, hey, listen, what's the primary objective of Young Life? It's outreach. And we're trying to create environments where kids can belong before they believe. And so if we're throwing Bible quizzes, yeah, see, that person knows and no one's going to come. And so, that's not going to work. So we're trying to reach people who don't know Jesus, never heard about Jesus. We do things in creative ways. Another time, I was approached by a donor about someone who saw something on Facebook that they didn't like. They saw one of our leaders' page, and they said, why was that leader there at that particular place? Because pictures tell a big story, as we all know, sometimes too much. And I simply said, hey, I love the fact that my leader was there. Because they're in the culture, and they're not abusing anything, and they're loving people, and they have a chance to share who Jesus is in a very creative way. But again, we're not asking anyone to practice being sin or anything like that. And the last story I'll share with you is this, is that another story about a leader who took a kid to camp. And this kid got saved at camp, and on the way home from the bus, usually kids are pumped. They're excited, and they're just wired. But this kid went and sat in the back all by himself, and he just kind of checked out. And this leader that had brought him, not one of our leaders, but a leader, actually one of my bosses, he went to the back of the bus and sat with this kid. And he just said, hey, what's going on? And this kid began to cry. And he looked at my leader and he said, why haven't we told everyone? This is too big not to. And that just rocked my leader. And he wasn't pointing my finger at my leader, at that leader. But he was just saying, hey, why we have to tell everyone? We have to tell everyone about the good news. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we have to do it. And if the worship team come on up now, we're going to continue in worship here in a second by singing. And in a minute, we're going to take communion together. We have 2 stations right there. You come down and get them when you feel ready. And we're also going to have people on each wall, which are we call them our prayer corners, even though there are walls, our prayer walls. And I want to encourage you guys during this time of worship to come down to the prayer walls and pray with that person for their 5. Pray for your 5 with that person. And let's really begin to be a church that does not worry about us. So when we create environments, we're not thinking about us. We're thinking about those who are not here. And so that's my prayer for us at Blue Bridge, that we continue to grow and we continue to multiply, which you guys heard about last week. We're going to 2 services, which is so exciting. It's just another step closer to our ultimate dream of going across a river and beyond. But I'll leave you with this, is for I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. So no matter who you are or where you have been or what you have done, you can be saved. So I'm going to pray. We'll worship. Communion is open, which communion is just another way for us to share with God what he's done in our life, and most importantly, to celebrate what he did for us on the cross. The juice represents his blood, the bread represents his body, and we just want to take that in remembrance of him for what he's done for us. Let's pray. Jesus, we just thank you for today. I thank you that you set the perfect example for us while we were here on earth, while you were God and bod. And we just love you, and we just pray right now, as we leave here this place, you can put those 5 people on our hearts like never before. That you can begin to break our hearts as your heart breaks for others. That we can be intentional in all that we do. We can go out of our comfort zones. We can embrace people instead of judge people. And we just love you with all of our hearts. And at the end of the day, we want to see what you did in us and the people that we love, and we want them to get to know you. In your name I pray. Amen.